Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter movies have become just as iconic as the books they're based on, but no matter how hard the directors and screenwriters tried, it was impossible to bring every nuance and hidden meaning from J.K. Rowling's pages to the screen. Many viewers have never read the original novels, and that doesn't make them any less devoted as fans. However, there are moments in the films that seem strange or incomplete, and only those who read the books know the truth behind them. Today I'll talk about those scenes. Enjoy the video. Number 1. The Marauders, who were Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. The films leave out one of the most emotional and tragic parts of the story: the deep friendship between Harry's father and his closest friends. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew called themselves the Marauders during their youth. They created the magical Marauders map and were more than pranksters. They were true heroes. To support Remus, who turned into a werewolf, his friends secretly became animagi. James transformed into a stag, Prongs, Sirius into a large black dog, Padfoot, Peter into a rat, Wormtail, and Remus, due to his lycanthropy, was Moony. This explains why Harry's Patronus is a stag, why Snape's is a doe, like Lily's, and why Harry's message, "He's got Padfoot," carries such emotional weight. Without these details, the scenes with the Marauders map and the familiar nicknames feel mysterious and fragmented. A whole layer of emotion and backstory is lost in the films. Number 2. Why Severus Snape is the Half-Blood Prince. Viewers of the Half-Blood Prince heard the title over and over, yet never really understood who it referred to. Only in the end does Snape shout, "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter? Yes, I am the Half-Blood Prince." But why did he call himself that? The books explain it all. Severus was born to Witch Eileen Prince and Muggle Tobias Snape. His father was cruel and abusive, and his mother, the only magical presence in his life. To distance himself from his father, Severus took on his mother's maiden name, Prince, and proudly emphasized his half-blood status. It was a mask, an alter ego, born from solitude and pain. With this knowledge, it's easier to understand why Snape clung to his old textbook, created spells, and crafted a secret identity. It wasn't just a nickname. It was his escape from suffering. Number 3. Barty Crouch Jr.'s escape, what the movie left out. In Goblet of Fire, it's revealed that the defense against the dark arts teacher for the entire year isn't really Moody, but Death Eater Barty Crouch Jr. using Polyjuice Potion. But how did he even escape Azkaban? The film gives no explanation, but the books provide a chilling backstory. Barty's mother was dying and convinced her husband to swap places with their son in Azkaban. Under the Imperious Curse and a disillusionment charm, Barty lived under house arrest, guarded by the house elf Winky. Later, Voldemort found out and freed his loyal servant. The elder Barty Crouch was then placed under Imperious, while the younger began executing the plan to bring the Dark Lord back. This brilliant but dark plotline is completely omitted from the films, leaving a confusing gap in the logic of events. Number 4. How did the Death Eaters find Harry at the cafe? The scene where the trio hides in a Muggle cafe after the wedding attack feels intense, but also inexplicable. How did the Death Eaters find them so fast? The films don't explain, but the books do. Voldemort's name was cursed with the taboo, a magical trap that tracked anyone who dared to say it aloud. It was bait for the brave. Only those unafraid of the Dark Lord used his name. Harry says Voldemort, and seconds later the Death Eaters arrive. It was a subtle enchantment no one understood until Hermione pieced it together. Number 5. Aberforth and the Mirror. Who was watching over Harry? In Deathly Hallows, Harry carries a mysterious shard of mirror that flashes with a blue eye. Who is it, and why does the mirror help him? The answer lies in the books. The mirror was half of a pair Sirius gave Harry for Christmas. It allowed instant communication between the holders of each half Harry never used it while Sirius was alive, and after his death he smashed it in anger. The shard ended up with Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's brother. He had been watching over Harry and eventually helped him escape Malfoy Manor. Without this context, the mirror scenes seem mystical, but confusing. Number 6. The romances of Bill and Fleur, Lupin and Tonks. In the movies, we suddenly see Bill marrying Fleur. Lupin and Tonks are revealed to be a couple, expecting a child, and then they die, without a single line of development. But in the books, these are full-blown romantic arcs. Bill noticed Fleur back in Goblet of Fire, and they grew closer while working at Gringotts. Their wedding was the natural result of a real relationship, not a random plot point. Lupin and Tonks, even more emotional. Lupin initially rejected the relationship, believing himself too dangerous for her. He even fled when he learned Tonks was pregnant. But Harry brought him back with harsh, powerful words. The films rob us of these heartfelt moments, turning love stories into flat side notes. Number 7. Neville's parents and his hidden tragedy. Neville. Longbottom stood with the sword of Gryffindor in his hand, defying Voldemort, his voice shaking but steady. In the films, it's a moment of bravery. In the books, it's something more. A legacy fulfilled. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, had once fought the same fight. They were auras, heroes, tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange. Neville visited them in St. Mungo's. He brought them gifts. His mother gave him a used gum wrapper. "She likes giving me something," he said quietly, "even if it's not much." They didn't recognize him. They never would, but he kept going, never missed a visit. He never spoke of it in school, never used it for sympathy. That pain was his alone. So when he stood against Voldemort, he wasn't just defending Hogwarts. He was finishing what his parents started. He was fighting for them, for everything they lost. The film shows a hero, the book shows a son, and that difference is everything. Number 8. The death of Peter Pettigrew. In the cellar of Malfoy Manor, Peter Pettigrew raised his wand. He had orders to kill. But when Harry said, "You're going to kill me after I saved your life," something cracked. For one breathless second, Wormtail hesitated. His grip faltered. He remembered the night in the Shrieking Shack, the moment Harry had spared him. That flicker of humanity cost him everything. The silver hand Voldemort had given him sensed the weakness. It turned on its master. It closed around Pettigrew's throat, and it choked him to death. The books call it justice. The hand Voldemort enchanted was a gift, but only for the loyal. "You should have died rather than betray your friends," Sirius once told him. And in the end, Peter did die, strangled by the very magic meant to reward him. The films erased that ending. Pettigrew just vanished. No betrayal, no mercy, no death. But in the books he received the fate he had earned by choosing fear over friendship and cruelty over conscience. Number 9. Percy Weasley's conflict with his family. Percy Weasley stood in his ministry robes, cold and distant. He called Dumbledore reckless. He called his family fools. He walked out of the burrow and didn't look back. For 2 years his mother sent him letters. He returned them unopened. Ron cursed his name. Even Arthur, gentle, kind Arthur, looked heartbroken. Percy chose career over kin, power over principle. And the ministry welcomed him, blind to Voldemort's rise, eager to use Percy's obedience. In the films, he's just another redhead. In the background, in the books, he's the brother who broke the Weasley heart. He came back when it mattered most. In the middle of the Battle of Hogwarts, Percy burst into the room, out of breath, eyes shining with tears. "I'm sorry," he said to Fred. "I was a fool. I was a pompous idiot." And Fred laughed. That was their last moment. Minutes later, Fred died. Percy knelt beside him, refusing to move. He fought like a man possessed. That scene never made it to the screen, but in the book it was redemption through grief. A brother returned, too late to save, just in time to mourn. Number 10. the story of Winky the house elf. Winky was not like Dobby. She didn't want freedom. She begged to serve. In the books, she belonged to the Crouch family, loyal to Bartemius Crouch Sr., even after he secretly imprisoned his Death Eater son. When the truth threatened to escape at the Quidditch World Cup, Winky was blamed. She was dismissed in public. For a house elf, it was shame worse than death. Hogwarts took her in, but Winky never recovered. She wept in the kitchens, drank butterbeer until she couldn't walk straight. "Winky is a good elf. Winky is not ashamed," she cried, trembling and drunk. Her grief was about more than a lost job. She had loved her master, even when he had forced her to keep the darkest secrets. Her story showed Harry and his friends something they hadn't understood. Freedom could hurt. Not every elf wanted it. Not every human deserved loyalty. Winky's pain was real and raw and ignored, except by one person, Hermione. Seeing Winky changed her. She founded SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. It started as a students' protest, but behind it stood a broken elf in a kitchen corner, clutching a butterbeer bottle. In the films, Winky never appears. There's no Crouch family shame, no trembling elf hiding guilt and trauma, no movement born from injustice. The story loses something vital without her. She wasn't a side character. She was the mirror of the system, of what happens when loyalty is abused and freedom is misunderstood. Winky didn't ask to be a hero, but in her silence and sorrow, she became a symbol. Number 11, The Secret of Regulus Black. The name RAB appears on a mysterious note inside the fake locket. In the film, this clue leads nowhere, but in the book, it unravels the hidden courage of a forgotten boy, Regulus Arcturus Black. He was Sirius Black's younger brother, a Death Eater, a true believer. But then he saw something that changed everything. Voldemort forced Kreacher, the Black family's house elf, to drink the potion in the cave. He left him there to die. Regulus didn't ask questions. He gave Kreacher a direct order to return. The elf obeyed and told him everything. Regulus realized that Voldemort wasn't just dark, he was evil. He had created Horcruxes. He had built immortality on murder. Regulus didn't run, he didn't confess. He acted. He asked Kreacher to take him to the cave. He drank the poison himself, screaming in agony. He replaced the real locket with a fake one and gave the elf a final command: "Return home!" Kreacher escaped. Regulus drowned. He was 18. "He must have known he wouldn't come back," said Harry in shock. "He died trying to bring Voldemort down." The films never show this. They don't show how a quiet, forgotten boy defied the Dark Lord when no one else dared. They don't show how a house elf carried a war hero's legacy for years. Regulus wasn't a coward. He wasn't a follower. He was the first to see the truth and die for it. Without that story, the Black family remains a house of shame. With it, we see the spark of redemption burning in its heart. Number 12, the true importance of wand loyalty. Voldemort stood in the ruins of the Great Hall, holding the Elder Wand high. His voice echoed. His power was absolute. And yet, nothing worked. The most powerful wand in existence refused to obey him. To anyone watching the film, it might seem like dramatic irony. But the truth was far more magical. The Elder Wand was never his. It had already chosen someone else. In the books, wand law is sacred. Ollivander explains it carefully. The wand chooses the wizard. That much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand law. A wand can switch allegiance if its master is disarmed or defeated. That's what Voldemort failed to understand. He stole the wand from Dumbledore's tomb, thinking its power lay in ownership. But the wand's loyalty had already moved on, first to Draco. Malfoy, who disarmed Dumbledore on the Astronomy Tower, then to Harry, who later disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor. It's not the wand, it's the wand's loyalty, Harry realizes. In the final duel, Voldemort tries to cast the killing curse with a wand that does not serve him. The spell rebounds. It isn't luck. It isn't coincidence, it's consequence. The Elder Wand refused to kill its true master. That twist, one of the most important in the series, is barely explained in the movie. There's no time for wand politics, no mention of Draco's brief moment of power, no weight behind Harry's final choice to return the wand to Dumbledore's grave. Without this context, the scene feels hollow. Voldemort dies, but no one understands why. The Elder Wand becomes just another weapon when in truth it's a character. It chooses, it judges, and in the end it turns on the man who never earned its trust. That's not a random magical moment. That's the heart of Rowling's magic. Power belongs not to the one who takes, but to the one who's chosen. Number 13. Why wasn't Harry expelled for using magic? When Harry Potter cast the Patronus charm in Order of the Phoenix, it wasn't just a reaction to fear. It was a lifeline. A pair of Dementors had attacked him and Dudley in Little Whinging. Harry had no choice. Yet the very next day, an owl arrived with a chilling decree. You are hereby expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. To viewers of the film, the sequence felt harsh and confusing. Why was this moment treated so severely, and why was the punishment suddenly revoked? The answer lies in the Ministry's agenda, not the spell. In the books, we learn that the Ministry of Magic monitors underage magic through the trace, but they can't detect who did the magic, only that magic occurred. Normally, in wizarding households, adults are blamed if something happens. But for someone like Harry living with Muggles, the Ministry assumes he's the only possible culprit. That's why they reacted so quickly, but it wasn't just about rules. Dolores Umbridge and Cornelius Fudge saw an opportunity. Discrediting Harry meant weakening Dumbledore, their true target. At Harry's hearing in the Wizengamot, the courtroom is packed. Laws can be changed, Harry, whispers Dumbledore before entering. It's not a fair trial. It's politics. Fudge tries to paint Harry as unstable, unreliable, and dangerous. But Dumbledore fights back, calmly stating, the law clearly states that magic may be used before Muggles in exceptional circumstances. The attack by Dementors counted. It was only Dumbledore's intervention, not justice, that saved Harry from permanent expulsion. This moment is crucial. It shows the Ministry's denial of Voldemort's return and how far they were willing to go to silence those who spoke the truth. Without this context, the movie scene loses its deeper meaning. To the casual viewer, the Ministry just seems erratic, but in the book, it becomes clear. This was a deliberate strike against a boy who dared to name the darkness. Number 14, the real reason behind Dumbledore's army. Of all the scenes in the Harry Potter film series, few are as quietly misunderstood as the formation of Dumbledore's army in Order of the Phoenix. On screen, it appears almost spontaneous, as if 3 over-enthusiastic teenagers simply decided one day that they knew better than their teachers. The spark in the film is a brief complaint about Dolores Umbridge's ineffective teaching style. But for those who have read the book, the formation of the DA was not merely a youthful rebellion or an extracurricular curiosity. It was an act of survival. It was a calculated and courageous response to a system that had turned hostile against its own children. In the book, the weight of the Ministry's control is not symbolic. It is suffocating. The appointment of Dolores Umbridge as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher is only the beginning. She arrives not as a mere instructor, but as a government enforcer. Sent by Cornelius Fudge, she embodies the Ministry's paranoia that Dumbledore is building a private army to overthrow them. Their solution? Cut off magical education at its root, limit the knowledge, restrict the magic, keep the students docile, distracted, and disarmed. And so Umbridge begins her reign of slow, deliberate erasure. The change is immediately tangible. In her first class, Umbridge distributes Defensive Magical Theory by Wilbert Slinkard, a text so dry and deliberately toothless, it might as well have been written by a bureaucrat. The students are told they will not practice spells, they will read, they will memorize, they will be examined, not on ability, but on obedience. Wands away, Umbridge says in the book, you have no need to use them in this class. Her goal is not just to prevent magical advancement, it is to instill helplessness. Hermione, always the student, is the first to realize what is happening. She's the one who names it. They're trying to weaponize our ignorance, she says, though not in so many words. She sees it in the shifting tones of the school, the whispered suspicions, the empty curriculum. The ministry fears knowledge because knowledge empowers, and so she turns to Harry. He is, after all, the only one among them who has faced Voldemort and lived. If the school won't protect them, if the adults have failed, then the students must become their own defense. Film version shows them gathering in the Hog's Head and deciding to form a group. It's charming, even exciting, but it lacks the dread. In the book, their meeting in the Hog's Head is cloaked in tension. They choose the dingiest, most isolated bar in Hogsmeade for fear of being overheard. Even then, the room feels too loud, the walls too thin. What they are planning is not just extracurricular, it is sedition, it is revolution. And the presence of students like Zacharias Smith, who questions Harry with open disdain, reminds the reader that trust is a rare and dangerous currency. The stakes are never higher than when Harry explains to them what magic really means in combat. He doesn't boast, he doesn't glamorize it. He describes Cedric's death, he talks about the graveyard. He speaks of the Cruciatus curse and the way Voldemort returns with silent, chilling certainty. These are not tales of glory, they are warnings. And those who hear him, really hear him, are not inspired, they are sobered. The DA is not a club, it is preparation for war. Dolores Umbridge does not remain idle. In the book, she ascends to power with terrifying efficiency. First, she bans all clubs not approved by her office. Then she becomes High Inquisitor. Then she begins inspecting classes, firing professors, banning subjects, and installing new rules by decree. Her educational decrees, numbered and published for all to see, form a lattice work of authoritarian control. Every inch of Hogwarts is measured and monitored. Her final goal is clear: eliminate dissent, silence Dumbledore, and crush Harry Potter. Harry, for his part, is a reluctant leader. He does not seek the role. In fact, he resents it. He is still reeling from Cedric's death, from the isolation forced upon him by the Ministry's campaign to discredit him. He is mocked in the Daily Prophet. He is ostracized by students who believe the propaganda. But in the room of requirement, when the walls seal and the candles flicker to life, something changes. There, Harry becomes what the wizarding world refuses to acknowledge: a teacher. The room itself is not simply a secret location. In the book, it is alive. It molds itself to their needs. Shelves appear stocked with cushions for practicing stunning spells. Targets rise for practicing jinxes. It is a sanctuary, not just physically, but psychologically. For once, the students are in control of their magic. They are not being punished for curiosity. They are being taught by someone who believes in the reality of danger and the power of resistance. Students like Neville Longbottom flourish in the DA. He begins the series as a shy, forgetful boy, constantly tripping over his robes, but in the room of requirement, he thrives. Neville's getting really good, Hermione observes. He masters spells with determination. He volunteers for practice. His parents, tortured into madness by Death Eaters, haunt his silence, but he chooses to fight. And that choice, made quietly and without fanfare, becomes one of the novel's most poignant arcs. Then there is Luna Lovegood, often treated as comic relief in the films. In the book, her role in the DA is profound. She is unafraid of speaking the truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Her faith in Harry, in Dumbledore, and in the unseen forces of magic is unwavering. She practices spells with grace, she duels with elegance, and when the time comes to accompany Harry into the Department of Mysteries, she does so without hesitation. Number 15. Why did Hermione erase her parents' memories? In the quiet flicker of the opening scene of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, the camera lingers on Hermione Granger, standing in the living room of her childhood home. Her wand is raised, her hand trembles ever so slightly. The pictures on the mantel fade, and with them, the memory of her ever having existed in the lives of two muggles, her parents. To a viewer of only the films, this scene appears dramatic, deeply emotional, but mysterious. There is no explanation, no context, no voiceover to clarify why a 17-year-old girl would erase herself from her parents' lives. The moment hangs in silence, poignant but opaque. And then it is gone. The narrative rushes onward, never returning to this act of quiet devastation. Yet for those who have read the books, the truth of this decision is not only known but seared into memory, a painful, noble act of self-sacrifice and fierce protection that defines Hermione's character more clearly than any spell she casts. In the pages of J.K. Rowling's final installment, the explanation comes not in some grand scene or tearful goodbye, but in Hermione's own words, uttered without drama, almost as a side note. I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia, she says in Deathly Hallows. The offhand manner of the revelation belies its magnitude. This wasn't a moment of impulse. It was calculated, precise, and above all, deeply painful. She did not merely say goodbye, she rendered herself invisible, non-existent in their reality, to save them from becoming targets in a war they couldn't even perceive. Voldemort's rise in power was not abstract for Hermione. She had watched him return with her own eyes, felt the sting of his influence in the halls of Hogwarts, and had seen Cedric Diggory fall lifeless to the ground. Unlike Harry, whose ties to the Muggle world were severed early and painfully, Hermione's roots remained entangled in a normal, non-magical life. Her parents were dentists in a quiet suburb, living lives governed by logic and routine. They were entirely unaware of the storm gathering beyond their comprehension. But Hermione knew. She understood that their connection to her, a Muggle-born witch who stood by Harry, Potter, made them vulnerable in the cruelest ways. To someone unfamiliar with the books, Hermione's act might seem cold. The film shows her walking away from the scene, her face unreadable. The implication, without context, leans toward tragedy for its own sake, but the truth lies not in the surface image, but in the hidden layers only revealed in Rowling's prose. Hermione knew that Death Eaters would use any means necessary to manipulate and torture those close to their enemies. They had done it before. They had murdered, maimed, and destroyed entire families to send messages or to exert control. For Hermione, the choice was simple, however heartbreaking. Either leave her parents exposed to that darkness or erase herself from their lives entirely. The level of magical skill required to modify a memory to such a degree is itself astonishing. Memory charms are volatile. Gilderoy Lockhart's mishandling of them is proof enough. They can backfire catastrophically. Yet Hermione, ever the meticulous student, perfected the spell and executed it with a surgeon's precision. She didn't merely erase specific memories, she rewrote identities. Wendell and Monica Wilkins believed they had always dreamed of moving to Australia. They packed up their lives and disappeared to the other side of the world, oblivious to the war that raged in their daughter's name. It wasn't just a spell, it was a false reality crafted for their safety, a testament to Hermione's brilliance and emotional strength. This act did not happen in isolation. It came during a time of preparation, of grim anticipation. The trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, were about to vanish into obscurity themselves, embarking on a quest to find and destroy Horcruxes. They had no idea how long they would be gone, or if they would return at all. Hermione knew she might die, and if she did, her parents would be none the wiser, free to live their lives in peace, never mourning a daughter they didn't know they'd had. It is one of the most selfless things any character does in the entire series, and yet the film glosses over it with a few seconds of silent footage. The depth of Hermione's love for her parents is not expressed in words, but in this sacrifice. She did not say goodbye because goodbye was not enough. She protected them in the only way the magical world allowed. In a story filled with grand gestures, epic battles, noble deaths, dramatic revelations, it is this quiet moment of preemptive heartbreak that reveals the steel beneath Hermione's intellect. She knew what was coming, and she prepared. She always prepared. What makes the omission from the film especially striking is that it reduces Hermione's agency. Without the explanation, the audience is left with a visual of a girl erasing her parents, but not the why. Her motivations, her fears, and her strength remain hidden unless one has read the books. It is a loss not only of narrative clarity but of character insight. Hermione has always been more than her intelligence. She is courageous, loyal, and profoundly empathetic. She sees the battlefield before the war begins and acts accordingly, regardless of personal cost. After the defeat of Voldemort, readers are rewarded with closure. Hermione travels to Australia, finds her parents, and restores their memories. She reclaims the family she lost, and they are whole again. It is a moment of quiet redemption, tucked away in post-canon acknowledgements, but no less important. This completion of the arc underscores that her act was not abandonment, it was temporary exile for the sake of love. Without this resolution, her choice might seem final, irreversible, but the restoration confirms her intent, not to disappear forever, but to shield and return. Number 16. Who is Ted Tonks, and why does he matter? Ted Tonks never appeared in the Harry Potter films, not once. His name was never spoken, his face never seen, and his fate never mourned on screen. And yet, in the pages of the books, he represented one of the most quietly profound rebellions against the ideology that powered Lord Voldemort's rise. To readers who paid close attention, Ted Tonks was more than just the father of Nymphadora Tonks. He was a mirror showing that love, not blood, defined the wizarding world. His absence from the movies might go unnoticed by many, but to those who turned each page of J.K. Rowling's novels, his story lingers like a shadow cast behind the main action. He was the unspoken thread tying together lineage, war, love, and sacrifice, and understanding him deepens the understanding of everything the series stood for. Ted Tonks was born a Muggle-born wizard, a fact that already placed him on the wrong side of Voldemort's twisted worldview. He married Andromeda Black, a pure-blood witch from the infamous Black family, a union so scandalous in its defiance of blood purity that her name was burned off the family tapestry. The same tapestry that still hangs in number 12 Grimmauld Place shows Andromeda's name scorched into obscurity. Her sisters, Bellatrix Lestrange and Narcissa Malfoy, remained fiercely loyal to pure blood ideals, and their rejection of Andromeda was as final as a curse. This act alone tells volumes about the kind of man Ted Tonks was, one who chose love over tradition, integrity over acceptance. In the films, Tonks appears almost alone. She is quirky, brave, capable, and dead before anyone understands why it matters. The books give her roots, family, contradictions, tension. Ted is part of that world. When Andromeda chose Ted, she was not just marrying a man, she was severing ties to an ancient lineage known for its obsession with magical purity. The Black family motto, toujours pur, meant nothing to Andromeda once she chose love. That love became the foundation of Tonks's upbringing, her values, her ability to stand beside Remus Lupin, another man whose society deemed unworthy. Ted's life and death are crucial in understanding how the war fractured families and ideals. When Voldemort took over the ministry and began rounding up Muggle-borns, Ted refused to register himself. "They expect me to come quietly to accept their labels," he said, and so he fled. He wasn't a fighter with a wand out like Kingsley Shacklebolt or Mad-Eye Moody, but his resistance was quiet and dignified. His death came not in a blaze of glory but on the run, hunted and discarded like many others who didn't fit the new world order. His final journey was a tragic echo of those who resisted oppression, by simply existing. What makes Ted's story more poignant is how it ripples through other characters. His daughter, Tonks, becomes an aura, one of the elite defenders of wizarding lore. She marries Remus Lupin, a werewolf and social outcast, creating a union as radical as her parents. Together they have a child, Teddy Lupin, who never meets his grandfather. This boy with hair that changes colours like his mother's and a heritage stitched from defiance grows up orphaned, just like Harry. But while Harry's story is well known and mythologized, Teddy's is quiet, barely spoken of after the war. Ted Tonks's death is part of that silence. The books capture his end in a few lines, but those lines are heavy with emotion. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Dean Thomas tells Harry, "I met Ted Tonks, the father of Tonks and Dirk Cresswell," there's already a weight to it. Later, the Daily Prophet declares him killed while on the run, grouped with other undesirables. No funeral, no last words. Just another casualty in a war that didn't stop to mourn, but he mattered to Tonks, to Andromeda, and, by extension, to Harry. Harry meets Andromeda only once in the books, and it's one of the most quietly moving scenes in the series. In Deathly Hallows, after escaping from Privet Drive with Hagrid, Harry crashes into the Tonks' countryside home. Andromeda opens the door, and in her face, Harry sees so much of Bellatrix, but without the madness. It's a haunting image. Two sisters once inseparable, now divided by ideology and love. And behind Andromeda stood Ted Tonks, the man who made her see a different path. He was the reason that the Black family wasn't entirely lost to darkness. The fact that he was Muggle-born and still married into a family like the Blacks was revolutionary. He wasn't rich, he wasn't aristocratic, he wasn't anything the Blacks valued. But he had humour, kindness, and a backbone of steel. Sirius Black, too, was cast out by his family, but Ted Tonks built a life from the pieces others threw away. He didn't rebel in fury, he just lived. That, in Voldemort's world, was enough to be a threat. There is a bitter irony in the fact that Bellatrix Lestrange, who helped destroy the world Ted built, was once his sister-in-law, that the woman who murdered Tonks was her own aunt. These complexities of blood and betrayal make the Wizarding War more than just good versus evil. It was families turning against each other, sisters on opposite sides of the battlefield, fathers buried nameless while others etched their legacy in blood. Ted never hexed anyone on the battlefield, but he was a casualty of those tensions just the same. Number 17. The full meaning of Snape and Lily's story. Of all the moments that separate the Harry Potter films from the books, perhaps none is as misunderstood, yet as revered, as the story of Severus Snape and Lily Evans. To the casual film viewer, Snape is painted in the final act as a tragic anti-hero whose love for Harry's mother redeems a life otherwise mired in bitterness and cruelty. The single word "always," spoken in response to Dumbledore's question about Snape's enduring feelings for Lily, was enough to cement his legacy in cinematic lore. But for readers of the books, this moment is not just a touching revelation, it is the culmination of decades of regret, loss, and irreversible choices. It is a ghostly echo of what might have been, not just for Snape and Lily, but for the entire wizarding world. Severus Snape and Lily Evans met as children, long before Hogwarts, long before Voldemort's rise. They grew up near each other in a working-class part of England, with Snape escaping from a home filled with neglect and cruelty, while Lily shone with kindness and natural magical ability. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the chapter titled The Prince's Tale unveils these memories, fragments of Snape's life that Harry sees as he gathers them from a dying man's tears. Among them is a glimpse of young Severus watching Lily conjure a flower with her magic. Her laughter is pure, and his fascination is immediate. He finds in her a world of warmth and light, a contrast to his grim and loveless home. This foundation of friendship became the only true happiness Snape ever knew. But as they grew older and entered Hogwarts, the purity of their bond began to fracture. Snape, sorted into Slytherin, found companionship among those who prized power, blood status, and ambition. Lily in Gryffindor grew close to students like Remus Lupin and eventually James Potter, whom Snape loathed. Despite these growing distances, their connection endured for years. Lily defended him when others mocked or bullied him. She believed in his goodness, even when he aligned himself with questionable friends. In The Prince's Tale, she tells Snape, "You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine, with sorrow, not malice." This line, quietly devastating, reveals that their drift was not sudden but gradual and deeply painful. The moment that truly severed them, however, was not an act of violence or betrayal, but a word. During an argument in their 5th year, after being publicly humiliated by James Potter, Snape lashed out at Lily. He called her a mudblood, a slur against Muggleborns like her. It was an act of self-destruction born from shame, rage, and pride. In that one moment, Snape shattered what little remained of their relationship. Though he begged for forgiveness, Lily never truly spoke to him again. This scene, absent from the films, is critical. It gives context to everything that follows, his choices, his guilt, and ultimately, his redemption. The films imply that Snape's love for Lily was noble and untainted, but the truth is messier. His obsession was not always healthy. He tried to control what he could not have. He aligned himself with those who hated her kind. Even when he joined the Death Eaters, he hoped she would be spared. But love is not a shield against consequence. When he heard that Voldemort planned to kill the Potters, he ran to Dumbledore, not to save Harry, but to save Lily. In the book, he pleads, "Hide them all then. Keep her, them, safe, please." His voice breaks not for James or Harry, but for Lily. This selfishness, so this inability to extend love beyond one woman, taints his motives, and yet it is precisely this flaw that makes him human. After Lily's death, Snape was not a changed man overnight. He did not become kind or just, but he became loyal to Dumbledore's cause, not for ideology, but for grief. He carried out dangerous tasks, protected a boy he could not stand, and lived a life of deception, all as penance for a moment of weakness he never forgave himself for. His life became an unspoken prayer for atonement. In the book, Dumbledore tells him, "You know how and why she died. Make sure it was not in vain. Help me protect Lily's son." And so Snape did, not with love, but with grim determination. The films romanticize his actions. They show the silver doe, the same Patronus as Lily's, and imply a pure devotion. But in the book, the revelation is more layered. When Dumbledore sees the doe, his voice trembles. "After all this time?" he asks. And Snape responds, "Always." This is not the love of a man who moved on. It is the mourning of someone who remained trapped in the past, who built his entire moral compass around a single, lost soul. The Patronus is not just a symbol of love, it is a monument to regret. What the films fail to show is how Snape's internal war never ended. He was cruel to students, often unfairly. He insulted Neville Longbottom, humiliated Hermione Granger, and showed clear favoritism to Slytherins. These actions were not signs of a secretly good man, but of one deeply wounded and bitter. His acts of heroism were not born from kindness, but from a commitment to a cause that honored Lily's memory. This duality makes him one of Rowling's most complex characters. He is not a misunderstood hero, nor a misunderstood villain. He is a man who made a tragic mistake and spent the rest of his life trying to undo its consequences. Another overlooked detail from the books is the symbolic irony of Snape's fate. He dies in the Shrieking Shack, alone, betrayed by the very master he once served. Voldemort kills him believing he controls the Elder Wand, a miscalculation that costs Snape his life. And as he lies dying, he does not ask Harry for forgiveness or recognition. He asks only to look into the boy's eyes, Lily's eyes. "Look at me," are his final words. In that moment, he does not see Harry. He sees her. His entire life ends the way it began, with Lily. The scene in The Prince's Tale where Snape cradles Lily's lifeless body is one of the most heartbreaking in the series. He sobs uncontrollably, not in the theatrical way of films, but with silent, animal grief. He had begged for her life and failed. His Patronus did not save her. His allegiance did not matter. In that room, he is just a broken man holding the body of the only person he ever loved. That image, seared into the mind of every reader, is absent from the films. And without it, the gravity of his actions is diminished. Even his relationship with Harry is more nuanced in the books. He does not warm to the boy nor grow to like him. He sees too much of James in his arrogance, his face. But the eyes, those eyes haunt him. Protecting Harry is not a noble mission, but a punishment. Every time he looks at the boy, he is reminded of what he lost. It is not until Harry enters his memories that he understands the cost of Snape's loyalty, and in turn names his son Albus Severus, declaring that he was the bravest man I ever knew. This line, often quoted, is a powerful gesture, but it too is complex. Snape was brave, yes, but he was also flawed. He allowed hatred to rule him for years. He hurt others. He became part of a movement that targeted people like Lily. His bravery was not born of light, but of guilt. That is why readers feel so strongly about his story, because it is not clean, it is not easy. It is a portrait of a man trying to atone for the unforgivable. The books never ask the reader to forgive Snape. They ask only that we understand him, his pain, his choices, and the way those choices shape the world around him. Without understanding the full scope of his past, the friendship with Lily, the betrayal, the regret, his final acts seem noble, even romantic. But with that knowledge, they become something else entirely, the last desperate efforts of a man trying to right a wrong that has already destroyed everything he loved. Snape's tragedy is that he was never the hero of his own story. He remained in the shadows, unloved, uncelebrated, and deeply alone. The only person who truly mattered to him was gone, and everything he did afterward was for a ghost. He never moved on, he never healed. He existed in a world that had already ended for him. His story is not about love winning, it's about love lost, and what remains when the light is gone. Even the symbolism of the dough itself is richer in the books. A Patronus takes the form of what you love most. For Snape, it never changed. Even decades later, his love for Lily, however flawed, however one-sided, was the defining force of his life. He never loved anyone else. He never allowed himself the possibility. That is not romantic. It is heartbreaking. The films show Snape as a man of few words and great sacrifice, but the books show a man haunted by his own voice, by one word spoken in cruelty that became his eternal punishment. The moment he called Lily a mudblood was the moment he lost everything, and from that day forward, every action he took was a quiet, aching scream to take it back. To understand the true weight of always, one must know the story behind it, the childhood friendship, the betrayal, the pleading, the protection, the loss. It is not a beautiful love story, it is a broken one that reminds us that some mistakes cannot be undone, and that sometimes redemption is not about forgiveness, it is about the willingness to carry your guilt to the end and never let go. Number 18. Why does Filch hate students? Argus. Filch lumbers through the halls of Hogwarts like a bitter shadow, his presence a constant annoyance to the students he seems to despise. In the films, his character is little more than a grumbling nuisance, a caricature of authority with a sour scowl and a fondness for chains and punishment. He appears at the worst moments, threatening detention, clutching his cat, Mrs. Norris, and glaring at children as though their very existence were a personal insult. To a casual viewer, he is simply there to obstruct joy, a cartoon villain with no motivation beyond pettiness. But for those who have turned the pages of the books, who have read between the lines and seen the cracks in the stone corridors of Hogwarts, there is a deeper sorrow that defines Filch. His hatred is not born of cruelty, it is carved out of shame, grief, and a desperate longing to belong. Filch is a squib, a fact that is revealed only briefly in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry accidentally stumbles upon a pamphlet titled Quick Spell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic. The scene is quick, almost tossed aside in the film, but in the book it serves as a window into a soul unraveling quietly in the shadows. A squib by definition is someone born to magical parents who possesses no magic of their own. It is the rarest and most pitied of conditions in the wizarding world, a cruel twist of fate that leaves someone stranded between two worlds. Filch was born into magic, surrounded by enchantment, but was denied its power. Hogwarts, the most magical place in Britain, is not a home to him. It is a stage on which he is daily reminded of everything he can never be. When Harry sees the Quickspell course advertisement on Filch's desk, he realizes something most others do not. Filch has not given up. He is still trying. He is still hoping. The course promises miracles it cannot deliver, selling false dreams to the desperate. That Filch would secretly enroll in such a scheme speaks volumes. It means he has spent years grasping at the threads of a reality that was never meant for him. He was reading an envelope addressed in spiky writing to Mr. Argus Filch, Hogwarts Castle. Harry glanced at the letter, which had slipped from the envelope, and read, "Quickspell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic." This is not the image of a villain. This is a man drowning in invisible sorrow. His loathing of students, then, is not about them personally, it's about what they represent. Every 11-year-old who strides into Hogwarts with a wand in hand is a symbol of everything Filch was denied. He must watch them thrive where he failed, master spells with casual delight while he scrubs floors with muggle tools. Imagine the humiliation of polishing magical portraits with a rag and bucket, of cleaning after magical creatures without the aid of charms. He is a man tasked with maintaining a world that will never accept him, and those children laughing in the halls, breaking rules, wasting their gifts, they are, to Filch, ungrateful custodians of something sacred. This bitterness is not unique to a single moment. It simmers beneath his every action, shaping the way he patrols the corridors. In the first book, he is elated when he catches Harry and Ron sneaking around at night. "Students out of bed! Students in the corridor after hours!" he crows, as if finally catching them will bring some measure of justice. But justice for what? For the decades of silent humiliation, for the laughter he has endured, for the magic he has never wielded. His obsession with discipline is not merely about order, it is about control, his only means of exerting power in a world that denies him every other form. There is an especially painful moment in Order of the Phoenix when Dolores Umbridge arrives and gives Filch more authority. He is thrilled, euphoric even, because for the first time someone is validating his approach. The decree that allows him to hang students by their thumbs, though never actually enacted, is something he yearns for. To the students, this is horrifying. To Filch, it is empowerment. For years he has been the joke, the background character, mocked by children. Now he is being given the chance to matter, not through kindness or skill, but through fear. That he seizes this chance with enthusiasm is tragic, not evil. It reveals how deeply he has been wounded by his powerlessness. His relationship with Mrs. Norris, his cat, is one of the few tender aspects of his character. She is his companion, his eyes and ears in the castle. But more than that, she is the only creature in that enormous school who shows him unwavering loyalty. Students sneer at him, professors ignore him, ghosts glide past him without thought. But Mrs. Norris is always there, brushing against his ankles, alert to his frustrations. She does not judge him for his lack of magic. In her presence, he is not a failure, he is not a squib, he is simply Argus. There is something deeply human in how Filch clings to the rituals of his work. He writes reports, polishes armor, logs rule violations. None of this requires magic. All of it demands patience and resolve. It is as if he is trying to prove that he belongs through sheer determination. And yet he is never really seen. Even Dumbledore, kind and inclusive as he is, never seems to embrace Filch with the warmth he reserves for Hagrid or McGonagall. This subtle alienation reinforces the idea that Filch is not just marginalized, he is invisible. One of the most haunting moments comes not from any dramatic confrontation, but from the quiet humiliation of being discovered. When Harry finds the Quickspell course, Filch's response is not anger, it is panic. It's not mine, it was a friend's, he stammers. His lie is weak, but it is telling. He is not used to defending himself because no one ever asks him to. No one ever gives him the benefit of the doubt. The idea that Harry, a first-year student, might learn his secret is unbearable. Not because Harry would mock him, though he might, but because the illusion would shatter. Filch has worked so hard to appear in control, to seem formidable, but behind the mask is a man terrified of being seen for who he truly is. The films, in trimming these moments, reduce him to a stereotype. His complexity is lost in the chase scenes and the quips. Without knowing he is a squib, audiences are left to assume he is simply malicious. But understanding his past changes everything. It turns every sneer into a cry for validation, every punishment into a desperate assertion of worth. He is not cruel because he enjoys suffering. He is cruel because he cannot bear his own. There is an irony in how Filch's role mirrors that of the students. They, too, struggle to find their place, to define their identities. But they have the tools to grow: wands, mentors, friends. Filch has none of this. He is the cautionary tale no one acknowledges, the ghost of what might happen when dreams collapse and no one comes to help pick up the pieces. Even his physical appearance becomes part of the symbolism. In the books, he is described as having a stooped back and a permanent scowl. This isn't just aging or grumpiness, it's the weight of years spent being less than what he was told he could be. It is a body bent by disappointment, by frustration, that has nowhere to go except into hostility. He moves like someone who expects rejection and has learned to meet it with contempt before it can wound him further. One cannot help but imagine what Filch's life might have been if the wizarding world treated squibs differently, if there had been schools for them, support groups, alternative paths to belonging. Instead, he was tossed aside, given a broom and a mop, and told to clean up after children who would never know his pain. It is no wonder he despises them, not for who they are, but for what the world lets them become. And yet, for all his bitterness, Filch never leaves. He stays at Hogwarts year after year, enduring the same humiliations. There is something noble in this, however twisted. He could have walked away, he could have disappeared into the Muggle world, but he doesn't. He remains close to magic, even if it cuts him because it is the only home he knows. That speaks of devotion, however poisoned it may be. When Fred and George Weasley unleash their fireworks and their portable swamp, Filch is furious, but there is something almost pitiful in his rage. He knows he will never be able to fix it. He must rely on others again and again to perform the simplest of tasks. How exhausting it must be to clean a magical school without magic. How demoralizing to be reminded daily of your inadequacy, even as you try to impose order. There is no redemption arc for Filch. He does not have a final moment of grace, no late-life revelation. But perhaps that is the point. Not every tragedy has a resolution. Some people simply endure. They survive, they work, they age, and no one notices the pain they carry. Filch is not an evil man, he is a broken one, and in that he is perhaps more real than most of the heroes. His presence in the story, when properly understood, serves as a reminder that not all wounds are visible, that not all villains are evil, that sometimes the most hateful behavior comes not from darkness but from despair. The films show us his anger. The books reveal its cause, and once you know the truth, you never see him the same way again. Number 19. Who created Sectumsempra and why it's so dangerous? In the flickering candlelight of the Hogwarts library, there is a moment at the Order of the Phoenix film that leaves viewers wide-eyed and breathless, but also quietly confused. Harry Potter, frantic and desperate, hurls a spell that slices open Draco Malfoy's chest, blood splattering across the bathroom tiles. The spell is brutal, visceral, and horrifying in its effect, yet never explained. To the casual viewer, it appears as a sudden detour into horror with no context. But to those who've traced every page of the books, that one word, Sectumsempra, carries with it a rich, dark history that unravels part of Severus Snape's tormented soul. It's a moment that, stripped from the source material, loses its depth and meaning. Because without the books, you don't know who Montan is, and without Montan, you don't know what Snape was running from all his life. Montan, of course, isn't mentioned by name in the films. You'll never see his name carved into the margins of Harry's borrowed potions book or whispered among the professors. But his shadow lingers in every page of that annotated text, scrawled in a quick, precise hand beside recipes and jinxes. He was a nickname, a ghost, a mask for a boy who was too angry and too brilliant to remain unnoticed, the half-blood prince. That was Montan's true name. A name Severus Snape gave himself in secret when he was still young enough to believe that magic could make him matter, when he still thought that creating pain could offer control. And through Montan's cruel genius, spells like Sectumsempra were born. When Harry finds the book, it's nothing but a lucky hand-me-down, tattered, ink-stained, more used than treasured. But the annotations inside it change everything. They transform him from an average student to Slughorn's favourite. Potions begin to make sense, instructions become clearer. Yet not all the scribbles are so benign. Some are just words underlined in thick ink. For enemies. And next to one such phrase is the spell Sectumsempra. It doesn't glow, it doesn't scream, but it waits, like a knife in a drawer, beautiful and sharp and silent. In the movie, Harry uses it without knowing. In the book, he knows just enough to be dangerous. There is a kind of desperation in the way Harry clings to the half-blood prince's notes. It's not just about academic success. It's the comfort of clarity, the seduction of power that understands him when no teacher, no class, no textbook ever has. Montan's book is a map for someone lost in a castle of shifting staircases. It whispers, "You're not alone in your confusion," but it also whispers, "I will give you what you need to hurt them." And that ultimately is what Sectumsempra was made for. Not protection, not defense, but pure surgical harm. In the films, when Harry casts Sectumsempra on Malfoy, the spell erupts violently. Blood bursts from Draco's chest as though an invisible blade has opened him wide. He screams, collapses, and lies twitching in the water. The scene is disturbing, urgent, cinematic, but it is also incomplete, because in that moment the film omits a critical truth. Harry is not just casting a spell, he is reaching into the darkest parts of another boy's teenage rage. He is summoning Snape's shadow, and he doesn't know what he's invited in. The book shows us more. It tells us that Sectumsempra was one of many spells Montan invented in isolation. The boy behind the pseudonym, young Severus Snape, was a half-blood at a school that revered pureblood names. He was poor, humiliated, friendless, save for Lily Evans. Surrounded by boys like James Potter and Sirius Black, he carved out his own magic in the only way he could. He made it. And that magic, like its maker, was precise and cruel. It sliced. It punished. It left marks you couldn't see unless you knew where to look. He had made up his own spell, including Levicorpus and Sectumsempra, which he had scribbled in the margins and labelled for enemies, half-blood prince, age 24. The fact that such a spell even exists inside a school textbook is horrifying if you stop to think about it. But the book makes clear this wasn't Hogwarts' curriculum. This was a boy's secret world stitched between the printed lines, a secret that should have stayed buried. And Snape knew that. That's why when he storms into the bathroom to save Malfoy, his face is not just panicked, it is terrified. Because he recognizes the wound, not just the blood, not just the cut, but the intention behind it. He sees his own hatred reflected back at him. Snape doesn't say a word to Harry in that moment about the spell's origins. He heals Draco, lifts him, and flees. But in the book, the fallout is much heavier. He demands to see the textbook. Harry, desperate, hides it, lies, surrenders a decoy. And yet Snape knows. He knows because he once sat in a corner of the library, writing spells in the margins while the other boys laughed outside. He knows because Montan was him, and Montan's sins were always just waiting to be repeated. Why did Snape ever write Sectumsempra to begin with? That is the question the film leaves unanswered. But the book does not flinch. It paints the picture of a boy consumed by bitterness and rejection, who wanted to be invincible, who wanted to silence the bullies, to carve fear into those who mocked him, who believed that if he could cut first, they would never get close enough to hurt him again. Sectumsempra was a spell for enemies. It was never meant to be cast casually. It was never meant to be shared. These are the lessons Snape learns too late. Years later, Snape would carry that shame. He would become the man who taught defense against the dark arts, not because he believed in violence, but because he knew its price. He forbade the dark arts in his classroom. But what he could never erase was the trail of ink he had left behind. Montan's magic lingered like a curse, and Harry, without meaning to, stepped directly into it. This is why the name Montan matters. It is not just a pseudonym, it is a symbol of everything Snape tried to bury. And when Harry finds that book, it's not just an old relic, it's a resurrection of pain, pride, and the twisted genius of a lonely boy. That's what the films don't tell you. They show the violence, but they do not explain the seed from which it grew. When Harry eventually learns the identity of the half-blood prince, it is a revelation laced with betrayal. Snape, the man he loathes, is the one who made him powerful. Snape, the teacher who scolds him, is the same boy who scribbled violent spells in the margins of a schoolbook. "I am the half-blood prince," Snape hisses, and the words land like a curse. In the film, the line feels like a plot twist. In the book, it is a tragedy, because it means that Harry has been carrying a part of Snape with him all along. There's a deeper irony here, too. Snape created Sectumsempra to protect himself, but years later he would save the very boy who used it. He would spill his life for him. He would hide that boy's mistakes, shield him from the ministry, and offer him occlumency, all because of an old promise to a girl named Lily. That's the cycle Montan never saw coming. That's the redemption Severus never believed he'd earn. Without the books, the bathroom scene is just gore. With the books, it is a mirror. It reflects Harry's ignorance, Snape's guilt, and the danger of unearned power. It shows what happens when magic is learned without understanding. When you use a weapon, not knowing who made it or why. The other spells in the book are rarely touched upon in the films, but they paint the same picture. Muffliato, Levicorpus, Langlock. Spells designed to humiliate, to silence, to control. They are the language of a bullied boy. They are the handwriting of someone who wanted to matter in a world that ignored him. And when Harry uses them, he is not only wielding magic, he is inheriting pain. The tragedy of Montan is not that he created dark spells. It is that he did so with no one there to guide him. No Dumbledore, no friends, no warmth, just his wand, his fury, and the pages of a borrowed book. That is why the spell is forbidden, not because it is powerful, but because it is born of sorrow. Snape tried to hide Montan. He tried to become something else, a teacher, a spy, a protector. But the past always finds its way back. And in The Half-Blood Prince it does. Through a spell, a wound, and a name. That's the kind of story the films can't show, but the books do, with ink, with silence, with blood. Number 20. Who is Bathilda Bagshot, and why is she important? The snow lay thick and silent over the gravestones of Godric's Hollow, muffling every sound except the occasional crunch beneath Harry's boots. Hermione walked beside him, her breath clouding the cold air, as they neared the dark silhouette of a cottage at the end of the lane. In the film, the house stands like any other, ordinary, broken, eerily quiet. The camera lingers on the crooked windows, the dilapidated door, and then, in a whisper of movement, the scene turns into a horror sequence. A trembling old woman beckons from the shadows. Her name is never spoken with reverence, her face unfamiliar to the uninitiated. She mumbles, leads Harry inside, and before the audience has time to grasp her significance, her body contorts and splits. The snake bursts free in a grotesque transformation. It is terrifying, yes. But to the casual viewer, that's all it is, a scare, a trick, a jump scare in the snow. For those who've only watched the movies, Bathilda Bagshot is a name with no weight. But for those who've read the books, that name is a shiver down the spine. It's the unraveling of truths long buried. Bathilda Bagshot was not just a frail witch with cloudy eyes. She was the historian of the wizarding world, the mind behind A History of Magic, the very textbook that every student at Hogwarts opens in their first year. Her words shape the foundation of magical knowledge for generations. More than that, Bathilda was a friend to the Dumbledores. She lived next door to them in Godric's Hollow and watched, with quiet observation, as tragedy and genius coiled around their home. She knew the Dumbledore children, saw Albus rise to brilliance, and witnessed the shadowy decline of his younger sister Ariana. She was there, an old woman still sharp with memory, when the rumours began to spread about Albus's strange friendship with Gellert Grindelwald. In her old age, she became the sole keeper of a history that no one dared record. Harry, haunted by Rita Skeeter's scandalous exposé on Dumbledore's past, is desperate to separate fact from gossip. After discovering hints that Dumbledore may have once embraced ideas of wizarding supremacy, Harry turns to Godric's Hollow not only as a pilgrimage to his parents' grave, but as a path toward the man he thought he knew. "I thought I knew Dumbledore," Harry admits in the book. "But I didn't, did I?" He hopes that Bathilda, this silent historian, might offer answers that the living refuse to speak. Answers about Dumbledore's ambitions, his silence about the Hallows, his estranged brother Aberforth, and the dark days that followed Ariana's death. Bathilda holds the potential to untangle Harry's growing uncertainty. But Voldemort knows that too. The moment in the film where Harry follows the shuffling old woman through her narrow home is dense with fear but void of context. She says nothing, barely acknowledges Hermione. Her voice, when heard, is garbled. Her movements strange. There's no pause for memory, no glimpse into what she once meant to the magical world. But in the book, her presence is loaded with quiet tension. Harry and Hermione enter a house filled with the scent of decay. The walls are lined with ancient books, and though Bathilda seems frail and unwell, there's something undeniably wrong beneath the surface. The aura of the place was unbearable, Rowling writes. A smell of age and dust, but also something sickly, something rotten. The truth, unknown. To Harry, until it is far too late, is that Bathilda has been dead for weeks. Voldemort, calculating and patient, had anticipated Harry's pilgrimage to Godric's Hollow. He knew the boy's sentimental heart would guide him to the graves, the house, and inevitably to Bathilda. And so he acted. After murdering the elderly witch, he placed Nagini, his loyal serpent, and one of his Horcruxes, inside her corpse. It was a masterstroke of dark magic, a desecration that blurred the line between body and parasite. Nagini wore Bathilda's skin like a disguise. She moved in her clothes, mimicked her form, and waited. It was a trap, not just for Harry's life, but for his hope. Voldemort sought to kill two birds with one blow, to physically destroy the boy and to emotionally dismantle the foundation of that bound Harry to Dumbledore's cause. This horror is glossed over in the film. The viewer sees a grotesque transformation but never knows whose body was used. There is no weight, no significance to the house, the history, or the betrayal. But in the novel, the emotional stakes are enormous. Harry enters that house seeking truth and instead finds a lie wrapped in skin. He doesn't just encounter Nagini, he stumbles into the rot of a secret that Voldemort had laid in wait for him. It's not simply a scary moment, it's a violation of history, of memory, of the sacred. The novel lingers on the implications. Bathilda's death is not a simple murder, it is symbolic. The woman who once chronicled the history of the magical world becomes a puppet of its darkest villain. The Keeper of Memory is turned into a weapon of amnesia. Harry barely escapes with his life. Hermione is injured, and his wand is broken. The moment marks the beginning of a new kind of despair. His wand, the one that had survived so much, was nothing more than fragments, the book states. But more than that, Bathilda's house leaves Harry with fewer answers than he came seeking. He is more lost than before. The questions about Dumbledore still burn unanswered. To the untrained viewer, the snake scene is creepy but disposable. One of many threats, but the informed reader understands it as a turning point. It is the climax of a chapter Harry didn't even know he was writing. It is the moment where the mentor's legacy begins to truly unravel, where the cracks in Dumbledore's myth widen, and where Harry must learn to walk without a guiding hand. In Godric's Hollow, he seeks answers and finds only silence. He leaves not only wounded, but alone. Even the graveyard, which the film glosses over with a sweeping shot, is filled with meaning. Bathilda's presence in the town ties together so many threads. The Potters, the Dumbledores, the Hallows, and the elusive Grindelwald. She is the link between past and present, a living witness to the lies that have shaped the war. The book allows her a kind of reverence. Hermione reveres her. Harry, too, approaches her with a mixture of awe and desperation. In the film, she is merely a creature. In the book, she is a monument turned to ruin. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this scene is the inversion of Harry's search for family. He returns to the place where he was born, where his parents died, and finds no comfort. He meets not an ally, but a ghost twisted by evil. The House of Memory becomes a house of horror. Bathilda, who once wrote the pages that guided young wizards, now shuffles voiceless through corridors of rot. Her transformation into a vessel of Nagini is more than a bodily possession. It is a metaphor for history rewritten, for truth devoured by lies. Rita Skeeter's biography of Dumbledore, though sensationalist, drives Harry to seek the truth. But truth dies in Bathilda's house. He arrives with questions and leaves with trauma. The house explodes in violence. The illusion shatters, and the message becomes clear. No one, not even Dumbledore, is safe from corruption. No place, not even one as sacred as Godric's Hollow, is safe from Voldemort's defilement. Bathilda's death also raises questions about magical ethics. Voldemort's use of her corpse is not just disturbing, it's unprecedented. He turns a historian into a host, desecrating both the body and the mind. In doing so, he mocks the very idea of memory. There was a sudden, horrible understanding, Rowling writes, and Harry's stomach turned over. It is not just that Bathilda is dead, it is that her identity, her story, has been erased, overwritten by evil. Hermione's horror at discovering the truth is immense. She realizes, too late, that they've been led into a trap by their own thirst for knowledge. "She was dead! Bathilda was dead," Hermione sobs, and it echoes the theme that pervades the final book. That seeking the past is dangerous. That truth, however noble, can cost dearly. The trip to Godric's Hollow was meant to be a moment of reconnection. Instead, it becomes a crucible. Even the room where Nagini sheds Bathilda's skin is symbolic. The bookshelves are dusty, neglected. The floorboards creak with age. The once proud home of the magical historian is now a shell. It mirrors the larger collapse of history in the wizarding world. Truth is no longer protected by old women and their libraries. It must be sought through pain, risk, and sacrifice. This moment, this visit to the house of Bathilda Bagshot, is essential. It is not simply a spooky detour in the hunt for Horcruxes. It is a spiritual reckoning. The transformation of Bathilda into a vessel of Voldemort's will is a declaration that even the keepers of truth can be twisted. That history, unguarded, can become a weapon. The audience who does not know Bathilda's backstory sees a snake in a skin, but the reader sees the death of memory, the desecration of a witness, and the isolation of a boy who no longer knows who to trust. In the end, Harry leaves Godric's Hollow not just physically wounded, but emotionally shattered. He cannot speak of it for pages. He cannot explain what it meant to follow in Dumbledore's footsteps only to find a corpse and a trap. The weight of that night, of Bathilda's ruined house, follows him. The film loses this entirely. It offers no name, no history, no mourning. Bathilda Bagshot in the books is more than a moment. She is a mirror. Her fate warns of what happens when truth is left unguarded, when memory is no longer sacred. Her house is not a haunted house. It is a grave for the past, a grave Harry must crawl out of again and again until he learns to make his own truths. And in that haunted silence, with snow falling on forgotten gravestones, Harry takes his first real step toward independence, not by finding answers, but by learning to survive without them. Number 21, Hermione and her hair potion. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there is a fleeting moment on screen, easily missed and seemingly unremarkable, when Hermione Granger hands Harry Potter a small phial and tells him it's the Felix Felicis he'll need later. For the casual viewer, it's just another spellbound object in a world overflowing with magical oddities. But nestled quietly in this exchange is a more obscure reference that never truly registers unless one has wandered the deeper corridors of J.K. Rowling's text. In the film, the bottle Hermione presents is labelled Essence of Hair Management, or more precisely, Essence of Murtlap, depending on the translation and prop department's notes. But to those who have devoured the books, particularly The Goblet of Fire, that moment carries a whisper of vulnerability, of a girl who has never quite made peace with her own reflection. Throughout the books, Hermione's hair is a recurring motif, not simply as a description, but as a symbol of her insecurities. From the very first chapters of The Philosopher's Stone, Rowling chooses to define Hermione not just by her intelligence, her large teeth, or her constant hand-raising, but by her bushy brown hair. It's a detail that becomes part of her identity, and not always a flattering one. When Ron Weasley makes fun of it, "You need a haircut," he says more than once, Hermione doesn't laugh. She flinches, she scowls, she shuts down. To the outside world, she's the smartest girl in the room. But behind that, she's just a teenager trying to smooth out the curls she thinks make her look wild and out of control. In The Goblet of Fire, Rowling gives us a poignant and transformative glimpse into this conflict during the Yule Ball. It's the first time readers truly see Hermione as a young woman and not just the girl with the answers. She enters the Great Hall on Victor Crumb's arm, her hair sleek and shiny and twisted up into an elegant knot at the back of her head. That sentence is brief, but it lands with power. The girl who has always been defined by her frizz, her logic, her books, walks into a room and stuns everyone, not with magic, but with grace. Later, it's revealed that Hermione used a liberal amount of Sleekeazy's hair potion. The name is comic, sure, but it's more than that. It is a balm, a quiet symbol of effort, of wanting to be seen, not as a sidekick, not as a walking encyclopedia, but as a girl. This single moment in the book opens a window into Hermione's soul, and it's one the films largely choose to shutter. Emma Watson's version of Hermione rarely battles with her hair. Her curls are soft, Hollywood-tamed, her clothes neat, her presence confident. The visual struggle with appearance, so essential to the book version of Hermione, is streamlined, sanitized, which is why that quick scene in Half-Blood Prince, where she hands over the bottle, means more than it appears. For those who remember the desperation she once felt to look normal, who recall the agony of adolescence captured in a bottle of hair potion, this becomes more than a simple prop. It's a nod to a girl still fighting her own reflection. There's a reason this small act resonates so deeply. Hermione is often portrayed as untouchable in her brilliance. She masters spells before the class even begins. She corrects professors without flinching. She punches Draco Malfoy with righteous fury. But none of this removes her from the web of insecurity that ties all young people in knots. Her hair is her weakness, not in the physical sense, but in the way it represents everything she can't control about how others see her. It frizzes in the rain, it puffs up in the humidity, it resists every charm and serum. When she applies Sleekeazy's hair potion, she's not just preparing for a party, she's rewriting the narrative of how she sees herself and how she wishes the world might see her. In the book, Ron's stunned reaction to her appearance at the Yule Ball isn't laced with sarcasm, it's real. It's perhaps the first time he sees her as someone beyond the Hermione he's always known. Not that she needs male validation, but rather that this moment proves how often people overlook what lies beneath. And in a broader sense, it mirrors the way readers themselves begin to realize that Hermione's greatest battles are often silent. They aren't fought with wands or riddles, but in front of the mirror, with a brush and trembling hands. The essence Hermione uses, whether it's Sleekeazy's, a fictional variation, or something referenced only in film, is a token of her effort to soften those internal battles, to appear polished in a world that expects girls to fit molds. That Harry accepts the bottle without comment is its own kind of subtle kindness. He does not ask her why she carries it. He does not laugh. He does not question. Because perhaps he understands, in the way close friends do, that even the smallest details can hold lifetimes of emotion. The films, bound by time constraints and screenwriting priorities, rarely delve into these emotional subplots. They present Hermione as competent, loyal, and brave, and she is all of these things. But what's lost is the texture of her self-doubt, the quiet grief that comes with not feeling right. The moment in the books where she shrinks from a photograph of herself, the way she hides behind her schoolwork, the anger she feels when people belittle her appearance. These details collectively form a portrait of someone far more human than the neat heroine on screen. That is why readers cling to this scene with the file. It's not what it contains, it's what it represents. Hermione carries her self-consciousness in a bottle. She bottles it up, literally. And in doing so, she becomes a mirror for the audience. How many of us at 16 hid chapstick in our backpacks or reapplied deodorant 3 times before walking into a room? How many of us stared at our reflections and wished for something sleeker, shinier, smoother? Hermione's bottle is not magic, it's memory. It's the residue of every bad hair day she's ever had. Even Rita Skeeter notices Hermione's struggle. In The Goblet of Fire, the gossip journalist describes her unflatteringly, focusing on her hair and appearance in a way that feels pointed and cruel. It stings because it reflects a truth Hermione already believes about herself. that no matter how intelligent she is, no matter how noble her causes, the world will still reduce her to her curls. And so she smooths them down, not to please others, but to gain a sense of control in a world where being a teenage girl often feels like spinning plates in a hurricane. It is moments like these that elevate Rowling's writing. She could have ignored Hermione's appearance altogether, but she doesn't. She imbues it with weight, not in a superficial way, but as part of Hermione's emotional architecture. Every potion, every serum, every anxious glance in the mirror builds a scaffolding of self-perception. And for readers, especially young girls, these struggles resonate more deeply than a spell ever could. The tragedy is that the films rarely allow Hermione to be fragile. They permit her tears, her fury, even her fury-driven brilliance. But they rarely make space for her to feel ugly, to feel small, to feel undeserving. They edit her pain into competence. And competence, while admirable, is not the same as character. In making her hair flawless, the films smooth out the very texture that made her real. So when Hermione appears with the file in hand, we are reminded, briefly, of a girl who once stayed up late before a ball, staring at herself in the mirror, heart pounding, hoping this time it would work, hoping this time she would be beautiful, not because she needed to be, but because it mattered to her. That hope, distilled into a bottle, is what we see in that scene. For those who know her from the books, it's impossible not to notice. It's a whisper from the past, a callback to the Hermione who doubted herself, who feared rejection, who smoothed back her hair and dared to dream. It tells us that she hasn't forgotten, that even as she stands tall and helps her best friend prepare for a battle, part of her still wonders if she looks all right. And that duality, strength and insecurity, makes her more than a character. It makes her real. The scene may last only seconds. The camera doesn't linger. The dialogue doesn't explain, but readers understand. They fill in the gaps. They remember her desperation at the Yule Ball. They remember how she looked at Fleur Delacour, polished and perfect, and felt less than. They remember the sting of being overlooked, the burn of being laughed at, the ache of wanting to fit in. That bottle is filled with more than potion. It is filled with every time she tried to be enough. So when Hermione hands over that vial, it's not a throwaway moment. It's the culmination of years of silent struggle. It's a sign that even in a world where magic can fix almost anything, there are still battles that must be fought in private. And sometimes victory is not in the winning, but in trying again, in picking up the bottle one more time, in smoothing back the hair, squaring the shoulders, and walking into the world anyway. That's what makes Hermione Granger unforgettable, not her brilliance, not her bravery, but her quiet, persistent effort to be whole. Even when she doesn't feel like she is, even when she fears she never will be. The potion may tame her hair, but it cannot tame her heart. And in the end, we love her not despite her insecurities, but because of them. Because they are ours too. And she carries them with more courage than most. Number 22, the role of Mundungus Fletcher. In the dim corridors of number 12, Grimmauld Place, a man cloaked in tattered robes shuffled past ancient portraits and rotting curtains. His presence was more a shadow than substance, seen briefly, spoken of in passing, rarely understood. His name was Mundungus Fletcher, and while viewers of the Harry Potter films might recall his stammering and bumbling manner, those who never turned the pages of J.K. Rowling's books might dismiss him as nothing more than comic relief. Yet beneath the surface of his dishevelled coat and perpetually guilty expression lies a far more complex truth, for in the books Mundungus is not merely a minor distraction, but a quiet catalyst, a thread in the great tapestry of war whose fraying ends have shaped the fate of heroes and the turning of dark tides. His first appearance in the films is fleeting, and even then his role is veiled in mischief. He seems more like a nuisance to the noble cause of the Order of the Phoenix than a true ally, but in the books he is drawn with a far sharper brush. Albus Dumbledore, ever the master of understanding human nature, recruits Mundungus not because he is trustworthy, but precisely because he is not. As Dumbledore himself states, he may be a thief, but he's our thief. In the shadows of Knockturn Alley and in pubs stinking of fire whiskey, Mundungus picks up whispers, secrets, illegal exchanges, scraps of information the Order would never uncover through more conventional channels. He is not loyal in the traditional sense, but his knowledge of the criminal underworld makes him valuable. Unreliable, yes, but valuable. What is never made explicit in the films is the depth of Mundungus's involvement in key moments. When the Order plans to move Harry from Privet Drive in the Deathly Hallows, Fletcher is assigned to impersonate the Chosen One, riding with Alastor Moody himself. But in the middle of the escape, Mundungus panics. He disapparates in fear, abandoning Moody in mid-air. This one act of cowardice leads to Moody's death, a death that devastates the Order. The films mention Moody's fall briefly, with a touch of sadness, but the treachery of the man who caused it remains buried. Mundungus's failure isn't just a blunder, it's a betrayal. The books reveal the gravity of his action, as Hagrid later tells Harry, "He disapparated, left Mad-Eye on his own, and Mad-Eye was killed." No apology, no redemption, just the harsh truth of war. This pattern of Mundungus floating in and out of the margins, seemingly inconsequential but oddly consistent, is repeated throughout the narrative. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry catches him trying to sell stolen cauldrons and is outraged that the man who supposedly fights Voldemort spends his time peddling contraband. Sirius Black, already at odds with the world, sees Mundungus as a symptom of the Order's desperation. "This is the best Dumbledore can find," he mutters, disgusted. But Sirius, like many others, fails to see that war turns allies out of even the strangest of places. For Dumbledore, Fletcher is a necessary evil, one of many compromises made in the name of resistance. In Half-Blood Prince, the films show Mundungus briefly again, lurking around Hogsmeade, caught trying to fence goods that look suspiciously like stolen heirlooms. The moment is played for laughs, yet again, he's just a scoundrel. But the books go further. The goods he is selling are not just any artifacts. They are stolen from the ancestral home of the Black family, which now belongs to Harry. Among them is a locket that no one can open. The locket is familiar to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. It resembles a mysterious object they found in the house while cleaning in Order of the Phoenix. Only much later does the truth dawn. The locket is a Horcrux, a piece of Voldemort's fractured soul. And Mundungus stole it. This theft sets off a new chain of events. After the trio realize the Horcrux is missing, they embark on a search that eventually leads them to Dolores Umbridge, who now wears the locket as a symbol of authority in the Ministry. The irony is brutal, an object of dark magic used by a woman of oppressive power, stolen by a petty thief. But none of this is explained in the films. There, the locket simply exists. It is a thing they must retrieve. The viewer is left wondering how Umbridge came by it. Only the readers understand that this relic passed from Sirius's house into Mundungus's hands and through the corrupt fingers of the Ministry, a breadcrumb trail of deceit. It is also in the books that we learn why Fletcher parted with the locket. He did not sell it, as one might expect. No, he gave it away under duress. He tells the trio, when captured by Kreacher and interrogated, that it was taken from him by some Ministry hag. "Threatened me, she did." That hag, of course, is Umbridge. Fletcher, driven not by principle but by self-preservation, barters with the devil to save his own skin. His confession is cowardly, but important. It reveals how dark magic slips through careless hands, how war allows evil to seep into even the smallest cracks of society. In the absence of this backstory, Fletcher's presence in the films feels disconnected. He appears at Grimmauld Place, he appears when Moody dies, he appears when chaos erupts, but the glue that binds these moments is never revealed. Only readers see the full shape of his influence. Only readers understand how one man's petty crimes ripple into grand consequences. That is the magic of Rowling's world. Even the lowest of men can leave a mark on history. Even Kreacher, the bitter and tragic house elf, comes to despise Fletcher more than almost anyone else. In Deathly Hallows, Kreacher undergoes a transformation that many readers recall with admiration, but his loyalty is earned only when Harry commands him to find Mundungus and recover the stolen locket. The retrieval becomes a symbol, not just of recovering a stolen item, but of reclaiming justice. Fletcher's betrayal becomes the catalyst for Kreacher's redemption. A single theft sets two very different paths into motion, one of cowardice, one of loyalty. Fletcher also embodies a theme Rowling returns to often: the moral ambiguity of war. He is not evil, he does not serve Voldemort, but his actions cause harm all the same. He serves himself. In another life, in another world, he might have been harmless, a peddler of junk, a whisperer of secrets. But in wartime, indifference is dangerous. A man like Mundungus does not need to choose a side to become a liability. His self-interest alone is enough to topple towers. What is perhaps most fascinating is that Dumbledore foresaw this risk and recruited him anyway. Dumbledore, who once told Snape, "You must be the one to kill me," understood better than anyone that war is not won with perfect men. It is won with the imperfect, with the broken, the cowardly, the unpredictable. Fletcher was never meant to be a hero. He was meant to be a piece on the board, an unpredictable piece, yes, but one that sometimes found itself in the right place at the wrong time. And while the films make him the butt of jokes, the books whisper of his weight, of the consequences that trail behind every stolen trinket, every cowardly flight, every reluctant confession. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione venture into the Ministry to retrieve the Horcrux, they are, in a sense, cleaning up Mundungus's mess. And though they never say it, though it's never acknowledged aloud, that mission costs them dearly. It marks the beginning of their exile, their wandering, their growing despair. Mundungus's shadow is long. Even the name Mundungus suggests filth, decay, something unpleasant. It fits. He is a man out of place in a world of heroes, yet he is necessary. The world Rowling created is not clean. It is not black and white. It is, instead, shades of grey, and Fletcher lives in those shades. He is neither friend nor foe, but an irritant that shapes the tide. Readers remember him not because he is lovable, but because he is real, because every revolution has its opportunists, every movement has its freeloaders, and sometimes the smallest mistake of the least trusted man echoes louder than the deliberate actions of villains. Voldemort did not instruct Fletcher, he did not curse or kill, but Mundungus's choices allowed dark forces to thrive. His cowardice killed Mad-Eye, his theft scattered Vital Eye objects. His failure forced heroes to risk their lives. There is no moment in the films where the camera lingers on Fletcher's face, allowing us to feel the weight of his guilt. There is no reflection, no unraveling of his impact. But in the books he is woven into the background, subtle but present. A ghost of all the ways a man can betray a cause without intending to. And perhaps that is the point. War is not always shaped by villains and martyrs. Sometimes it turns on the mistakes of fools, on the greed of a smuggler, on the fear of a runaway. Mundungus Fletcher did not want power. He did not seek glory, but in seeking only to save himself, he shaped the fate of others. And for those who read the books, that is a truth impossible to forget. Number 23. Why can Harry see Thestrals? In the shadow of the Forbidden Forest, as the students of Hogwarts gather for their journey from Hogsmeade Station to the castle, the camera in the fifth film pans across a line of carriages seemingly pulled by invisible forces. It is a familiar image for the audience, who has seen these carriages before, rolling along without any visible driver or beast. But now Harry Potter stands still, frozen, staring not at the carriages themselves, but at the eerie, skeletal creatures at their helm, creatures no one else appears to notice. Their wings are leathery and bat-like, their skins stretched tightly across protruding ribs and bony frames, their eyes milk-white and ancient. For the first time, Harry sees the Thestrals. For those unfamiliar with the books, it is a moment that passes without explanation, a visual change from previous films that seems to add atmosphere, but nothing more. This moment, however, is far more than atmospheric. It is the crystallization of a profound truth about Harry's emotional transformation and the nature of loss. In J.K. Rowling's novels, Thestrals are not random magical creatures inserted for effect. They are symbols, living embodiments of trauma, grief, and understanding. The books explicitly state that Thestrals can only be seen by those who have witnessed death and comprehended its finality. Before the death of Cedric Diggory, Harry could not see them. After, they become visible, not because they suddenly appear, but because he has changed. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry's confusion about these creatures is immediate. When he sees the carriages for the first time after returning to Hogwarts, he's struck with the realization that something is different. "What are those things pulling the carriages?" he asks, only to be met with blank stares. It is not until he meets Luna Lovegood that he begins to understand. Luna, with her dreamy voice and sad, distant eyes, is able to see the Thestrals too. Her mother died when she was 9, and since then the creatures have always been there. Her calm acceptance of their presence contrasts with Harry's discomfort. Through her, Harry begins to grasp the idea that loss marks you quietly and irrevocably. The films miss the essence of this exchange. Luna is there, of course, speaking gently about the creatures in a glade deep in the woods, but the emotional context is thin, a whisper, where the book gave us a scream. The moment passes too quickly, and the audience, unless they have read the novels, is left wondering, what just happened? Why can Harry see these beasts now? What changed? The answer is never truly given, and a moment of painful clarity is reduced to set design. The loss of Cedric Diggory in Goblet of Fire is one of the most harrowing scenes in the series. Cedric is murdered on Voldemort's orders, his death sudden and cruel. Harry, only 14, is forced to witness the collapse of an innocent life. He brings Cedric's body back, and for a moment the world does not move. But in the aftermath, grief is buried beneath headlines and denial. The Ministry refuses to acknowledge the return of Voldemort, and Harry is left isolated, haunted by what he saw. The appearance of the Thestrals the following year is not just a visual cue, it is a reflection of the weight he carries now, of the things he cannot unsee. J.K. Rowling makes this transition achingly clear. In the book, Harry's first sight of the Thestrals is laced with confusion and fear. He believes he is losing his mind. They were standing quite still, unblinking, watching the students file past. Their heads were bare of flesh, their black coats clung to their skeletons, their pupil-less eyes gleamed white in the darkness. It is only through Luna's quiet explanation that he finds understanding, and with it, a reluctant sense of kinship. The Thestrals become a metaphor for a world forever changed by trauma. The films do not erase the Thestrals, but they declaw them. They render them strange, mysterious, and otherworldly, but they do not explain why they matter. There is no moment of realization for Harry, no understanding that he sees them now because of what he has lost. This omission transforms a deeply human revelation into a decorative feature, beautiful but hollow. The viewer sees the surface but not the soul. To see a Thestral is to bear witness to death in a way that alters one's very perception. Not everyone who sees death immediately gains this vision. It requires processing, the painful digestion of reality. When Harry's parents died, he was an infant. He has no memory of their passing. When Professor Quirrell perished in Philosopher's Stone, it was in a cloud of pain and confusion. Even Cedric's death did not reveal the Thestrals right away. It is only after Harry lives with the knowledge, the memory, and the helplessness that they begin to appear. His ability to see them is a quiet admission. He is no longer a child. This subtle shift in perspective is echoed in the very way Luna describes the creatures. She says they are not evil, just misunderstood. They're quite gentle, really, but people avoid them because they're a bit different. In this, Rowling gives us more than magical zoology. She offers a reflection of grief itself, the invisible weight that changes how we see the world, that others may not understand. Thestrals are the embodiment of sorrow and clarity intertwined. They are not monstrous, they are mirrors. The scene in the book where Luna and Harry feed the Thestrals is tender and surreal. The creatures, for all their skeletal horror, are calm and curious. Harry watches as one of them approaches him. He reaches out, and it presses its head into his hand. It is a moment of connection not just with the beast, but with the part of himself that has changed. The boy who feared being alone with his grief finds in this strange creature a shared truth. The film offers a glimpse of this, but not the weight behind it. The touch is there, but the transformation is lost in translation. For readers, the Thestrals signal the end of Harry's innocence. From this point on, he is a different person, quieter, more withdrawn, and more haunted. The books detail his nightmares, his growing distance from Ron and Hermione, his sense that no one truly understands what he carries. Order of the Phoenix is Harry's darkest year, not because of the battles he fights, but because of the silence that surrounds him. The Thestrals are always there, waiting, watching, symbols of the things he cannot escape. This rich symbolism is entirely dependent on the explanation that the films do not provide. Without it, the creatures become curiosities, Gothic furniture in a story that should be aching with meaning. Viewers may marvel at their design, their wings, their bones, their ghostly beauty, but they are unlikely to understand why they matter. The loss of this context diminishes more than just one scene. It undermines a theme. The theme is this: death changes us, not just in the dramatic, violent sense, but in quiet ways, in how we look at the world, how we speak, how we love. The Thestrals are the manifestation of this shift. They do not haunt Harry because they are frightening, but because they represent a truth he cannot unlearn. He has seen death. He will never be the same. And yet, there is beauty in this too, in the strange bond he forms with Luna, in the gentleness of the beasts, in the shared knowledge that some things are real even when no one else can see them. Rowling does not let this metaphor fade. Later in the story, when the students fly on Thestrals to the Ministry of Magic, the creatures are no longer alien. They are companions, steady and strong, capable of bearing the weight of those who trust them. This flight is more than a rescue mission. It is a symbolic journey, a declaration that those who have suffered are not broken. They can still act, they can still fight. The Thestrals, once invisible and feared, become vessels of courage. This transformation is lost if the audience does not understand why Harry sees them. The films, in failing to explain, miss the thread that ties death to sight, grief to vision. The Thestrals are not visible to all because not all are ready to see. But once you do, you can never go back. They are the quiet acknowledgement of pain, the dark wings that carry you forward. There is a reason Luna, and not Ron or Hermione, is the one to introduce Harry to them. She lives in the same world he now inhabits, one where loss is not just a story, but a shadow that lingers. Her presence is not incidental. She is the bridge. Her calm, her acceptance, and her clarity show Harry a way to live with what he knows. The Thestrals are her gift to him, not in the literal sense, but in the emotional one. She names them, explains them, and by doing so, offers him understanding. For readers, this is one of the most poignant transitions in the series, the moment when magic stops being dazzling and becomes personal, painful, and profound. The creatures are not just beasts, they are milestones. And by seeing them, Harry steps into a new stage of life, a place where things are not so easily fixed, where wounds do not vanish, and where love and loss are two sides of the same coin. In this, the Thestrals are a triumph of Rowling's storytelling, a perfect blend of world-building and emotional truth. They remind us that in a world of spells and potions, the deepest magic is often the kind that changes us from the inside out. To those who have known loss, the Thestrals are not strange at all. They are familiar, even comforting. They are what remains when the light fades and the silence settles. So when the film shows them without words, without meaning, it strips them of their weight. They become ghosts without stories. But in the book, they are everything. They are the memory of Cedric, the silence after screams, the knowledge that innocence once lost can never be recovered. They are Harry's new eyes, and once opened, they never close again. Number 24. How did Hermione get Bellatrix's hair? Of all the strange inconsistencies in the Harry Potter films, few are as baffling to keen-eyed viewers as the moment in Deathly Hallows, Part 2, when Hermione Granger appears transformed into Bellatrix Lestrange. With Helena Bonham Carter perfectly imitating Hermione's nervous gait and Ron awkwardly disguised beside her, the scene plays well for dramatic tension. But for anyone who has not read the books, one massive question hangs in the air. How did they even get Bellatrix's hair? Polyjuice Potion is not whipped up from thin air. It requires a piece of the person being impersonated, something intimately personal, like a hair or nail. The movie skips over this entirely, giving no indication of when or how they obtained such a thing. And yet, for readers of the books, the answer lies in a scene so traumatic and understated that it left an emotional scar on Hermione herself. The key to this mystery lies within the walls of Malfoy Manor, where Harry, Ron, Hermione, Luna, Dean, and Griphook are imprisoned during their desperate flight from Voldemort's forces. This is no ordinary imprisonment. It is a moment of torture, degradation, and fury. Bellatrix Lestrange, wild-eyed and furious at the mere thought that someone had broken into her family's vault, turns her rage upon Hermione. Using the Cruciatus curse, Bellatrix torments the young witch with sadistic glee, leaving physical and emotional wounds that would last long after their escape. But among the scars and dust of that cruel encounter, something small and seemingly insignificant remained. One of Bellatrix's hairs stuck to Hermione's robes like a cruel souvenir from the nightmare. After Dobby's rescue and the group's arrival at Shell Cottage, Hermione is too shaken to speak much of what happened. Bill and Fleur take them in, offering a fragile peace in a time of war. But Hermione is not at peace. As she tends to her wounds and tries to find some measure of control, she finds the black hair tangled in her blood-stained sleeve. In the Deathly Hallows novel, this moment is rendered with grim significance. Hermione is revolted. The mere thought of using something from that woman, Bellatrix, the monster who carved the word mudblood into her flesh, is almost unbearable. And yet Hermione's logical mind sees the opportunity. That single strand of hair clinging like a parasite to her torn sleeve is the key to breaking into the very vault Bellatrix was so desperate to protect. J.K. Rowling offers this detail in such a way that it's both horrifying and brilliant. It gives Hermione agency, a moment of brilliance amidst pain, showing her resilience and cunning even in the face of trauma. In the book, she doesn't simply stumble across a hair when it's convenient. She notices it in the quiet aftermath, recognizing its value not just as a tool, but as a weapon. It's a tiny shard of Bellatrix's identity, and with it, Hermione can wear the skin of the very woman who tried to break her. It is a grim reversal, and one that carries tremendous narrative weight. That strand of hair becomes a trophy not of victory, but of survival. In the film, however, all of this is erased. The audience sees Hermione transformed, dressed in Bellatrix's dark robes, her wand clutched in her trembling hands. The change is abrupt and unexplained. It's as though they pulled the necessary DNA from thin air, conjured it like a spell. There is no trauma, no personal cost, no grim reminder of Malfoy Manor. And because of this, the scene lacks the emotional complexity that Rowling carefully wove into the story. For those who read the books, the transformation is not just magical, it is deeply psychological. For film-only viewers, it becomes a shallow disguise, robbed of its darker undertones. This omission is not minor. Polyjuice Potion is a difficult and dangerous brew requiring time, skill, and the correct ingredient. The importance of this component is drilled into readers from Chamber of Secrets when Hermione's accidental use of cat hair results in a painful and prolonged partial transformation. The stakes of getting it wrong are high, so when Deathly Hallows Part 2 skips over this crucial acquisition, it undermines not only the logic of the magic but the emotional resonance of the plot. It pretends the hair was never a problem, but in truth it was the most important ingredient in the plan. What the film gains in pacing, it loses in depth. The entire idea of impersonating Bellatrix hinges on that one terrible moment in Malfoy Manor. Without the memory of that scene, the heist at Gringotts loses much of its tension. Hermione is not merely in disguise, she is wearing the face of her torturer. Every step through those marble halls, every interaction with goblins who serve the Lestranges is a confrontation with the very trauma she endured. She walks like Bellatrix, talks like her, but inside she is sickened. This is not glamour, it's strategy built on pain. Rowling does not let readers forget that magic has consequences. When Hermione consumes the Polyjuice Potion made from Bellatrix's hair, it is a potent symbol of her strength and her suffering. She uses the very thing that was meant to demean her as a tool of resistance. It is not a coincidence that the hair came from that moment of violence. It is a form of poetic justice. Hermione takes the identity of the woman who branded her and uses it to breach the stronghold of the very regime that woman represents. The magic works not because it's convenient, but because it's earned through pain. This storytelling choice also speaks volumes about Hermione's character. She doesn't wallow in her trauma, nor does she ignore it. She uses it. She channels her fear and pain into a plan that will move their mission forward. And when she steps into Bellatrix's shoes, both figuratively and literally, she carries that burden with her. It's not easy for her, it never was, but she does it anyway. That moment, quiet in the book, absent in the film, is one of her finest displays of courage. For viewers who haven't read the books, this layer is invisible. The Gringotts scene plays out like a heist from any other fantasy film. There's tension, there's deception, and there's dragonfire, but without the emotional build-up, it feels like theatre. We are shown Hermione acting uncomfortable, but we aren't told why. The source of her unease is never made explicit. To those unfamiliar with Bellatrix's cruelty in the manor, her revulsion seems like stage fright, not personal horror. The film sacrifices authenticity for spectacle. It's a problem that highlights a broader issue with the adaptations. The films often flatten the moral and emotional complexity that make the book so powerful. They favor plot over meaning, moment over memory, but in Harry Potter, memory matters. The hair on Hermione's robes is not just a convenience, it is a scar, a whisper of a night that should never have happened, and yet did. By transforming that moment into a tool, Rowling allows Hermione to reclaim power. The movie, by skipping this entirely, takes that power away. There is also something tragically beautiful in the idea that a piece of Bellatrix Lestrange, this hateful, monstrous woman, was the very thing that enabled Hermione to infiltrate her vault. It's a reversal that works only because we've seen the violence firsthand. The reader remembers Bellatrix laughing as Hermione screamed, and so, when Hermione slips into her identity, there is a heavy irony. The abuser's essence becomes the means of resistance. It's a haunting transformation that mirrors the war they are fighting, using the enemy's tools against them. The loss of that detail in the film is not just an oversight, it's a missed opportunity. It could have added layers of emotional tension to the Gringotts break-in. Imagine Hermione hesitating before taking the potion, her hands shaking not from nerves but from memory. Imagine the camera lingering on the single black hair as she drops it into the potion. Imagine Ron watching her, aware of what she's reliving. These small visual cues could have deepened the moment. But none of this exists in the film. Even the practical logic is affected. Polyjuice potion takes a full month to brew, a detail explained in Chamber of Secrets. The trio could not have simply decided on a whim to impersonate Bellatrix. They needed to plan, to prepare, and most importantly, to acquire that key ingredient. The timeline only works because the hair was found early, back at Shell Cottage. Rowling ensured this was clear, anchoring the plan in logic. The movie, by contrast, glosses over this entirely, risking confusion and undermining the rules of the magical world. It also affects the tension with Griphook. The goblins' mistrust is based in part on the danger of the plan. They are attempting to deceive a bank run by suspicious and highly magical creatures. One misstep, and they could be discovered. Hermione's disguise is not a costume. It is a spell, one that must be maintained under immense pressure. And all of it, every second of the illusion, rests on the presence of that one hair. Without it, they would have no plan. Without Bellatrix's identity, they would have no way in. The reality is that not everything can be adapted from book to screen. Time, pacing, and visual storytelling force compromises. But some details are not just optional, they are essential. This is one of them. It's not about a potion, it's about pain, it's about memory, it's about Hermione finding the strength to weaponize her trauma. And by cutting this thread, the movie denies her that strength. It turns a scene of psychological power into a trick of makeup and robes. Those who've read the books remember Shell Cottage differently, not just as a sanctuary but as the site of planning, recovery and reckoning. It's where Hermione came to terms with what had been done to her and what she must now do in return. It's where the past stuck to her sleeve quite literally, and she chose to use it rather than be defined by it. That's the kind of bravery that defines her character. That's the kind of detail that should never be forgotten. The moment in the film works only because the audience fills in the blanks. But storytelling should not rely on memory to complete its meaning. It should provide it. And in this case, only readers of the books understand the full weight of Hermione's transformation. For everyone else, it's just another magical trick, but for those who know the truth, it is so much more. It is a scar turned into strategy, a curse turned into opportunity, a hair turned into hope. Number 25. Why did Harry save Draco Malfoy? In the smoky, crumbling chaos of the Room of Requirement, the fire raged like a living thing, hungry, wild, relentless. It wasn't just any fire. It was cursed flame, fiend fire conjured by a spell that few dared to use, and even fewer could control. As the room shifted and objects dissolved into ash, one image lingered. Harry Potter, clinging to his broomstick, hurtling through the choking smoke and reaching out, not for a relic, not for revenge, but for Draco Malfoy. In the film, it flashed by in a blaze of tension and drama. But to those who had read the books, that moment was a declaration of everything Harry had become, everything he chose to be, when he could have become something else entirely. It wasn't about friendship. It wasn't about owing Draco anything. This was the same Draco who once laughed as Hermione was called a mudblood, who stood by while Death Eaters terrorized students, who disarmed Dumbledore and let Death Eaters into Hogwarts. And yet, as fire licked at the shelves and the cursed room shrieked around them, Harry didn't hesitate. He dove for Draco, then for Goyle, then barely made it out alive. The movie framed it as bravery, as heroism. But in the book, it was much more than that. It was the crystallization of a philosophy that had been growing in Harry since his first year, the refusal to become like the people he fought. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling doesn't let this act pass as a throwaway. After they escape, Ron grumbles about risking their lives for someone who's spent years making theirs miserable, but Harry shrugs it off. "That's the second time we've saved his life tonight," he says, almost absently, almost like it had to be done. That's the point. Harry never sought to punish Draco. He never sought revenge. He simply couldn't let someone die, not even someone like Malfoy. That's not a choice the films make obvious, and yet it's the very essence of who Harry is. He is the antithesis of Voldemort, not because of power, but because of mercy. The contrast to Voldemort is central to understanding this act. Voldemort would have left Draco to burn. In fact, he would have set the fire himself. He believed in domination, in power, in fear. He would never have seen the point of saving a coward, a traitor, a boy who had failed him. But Harry had been taught by Dumbledore, by Sirius, by Lupin, that love and compassion were the strongest forms of magic. Time and again, Dumbledore reminded Harry that what sets him apart from Tom Riddle is the capacity to feel, to grieve, to forgive. And in that blazing room, Harry proved he had listened. One must also remember that Draco, in his own way, was broken. In the final book, he's not the sneering bully of earlier years. He's pale, nervous, hesitant. His wand trembles. He doesn't even seem to know which side he's on. When Harry disarms him at Malfoy Manor, Draco does nothing to stop him. When Death Eaters threaten to kill Hermione, he doesn't intervene, but he doesn't assist either. He's not brave, but he's no longer cruel. He's a boy who grew up with monsters, and when the time came to become one, he faltered. In saving him, Harry isn't just showing compassion, he's recognizing the humanity in someone who was raised to ignore it. What makes this moment poignant is that Harry doesn't benefit from it. Draco never thanks him. He never acknowledges what Harry did. In fact, when Harry reveals himself in the Great Hall, Draco only hesitates for a second before slipping away. The gesture isn't mutual. There is no redemption arc for Draco in the books, not an overt one. And that's why Harry's decision is so powerful. He saves someone who might never change, someone who might never appreciate it. He does it anyway, because it's right. This is rooted deeply in the book's themes. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." In that room, with every reason to let Draco perish, Harry chooses life, chooses empathy. The movie, without this philosophical underpinning, turns it into spectacle. The fire is big, the flying is dramatic, the music swells. But it doesn't explain why. To film-only viewers, it's a cool sequence. To readers, it's a defining moral stand. It also echoes an earlier moment, one that's essential to understanding Harry. Back in the graveyard in Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort rises again, Harry could run, he could beg, but he stands his ground knowing he might die. And when Cedric is murdered, Harry brings his body back. He insists on dignity, even for the dead. These acts of compassion, small, thankless, often unnoticed, define Harry more than any spell or prophecy. Saving Draco is another of these quiet, seismic choices. Draco, in contrast, represents the path Harry could have taken. Both were born to magical families, both grew up as only children, both entered Hogwarts as boys with burdens. But where Harry sought truth, Draco sought power. Where Harry questioned authority, Draco submitted to it. Where Harry made friends across bloodlines, Draco isolated himself in pure-blood pride. Saving him isn't just mercy, it's the symbolic victory of Harry's path over Voldemort's. He rescues not just a boy, but the possibility that even the lost can be spared.